evening. Welcome to the City of Opa-locka Budget Workshop. Today is Wednesday, July 7th, 7 o'clock. Madam Clerk, 7:15. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Taylor,
Here.
Vice Mayor Williams,
Here.
Mayor Pike.
I'm here. Commissioner Taylor, would you lead us in invocation?
God, we thank you for bringing us together one more time in your name. God, we ask that you come into this meeting, that we might do your will for your people. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Pledge of allegiance. All right. Public comments for agenda items is open. Public comments is open. Madam Clerk, do we have any online participants?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. All right. Seeing none, public comments is closed. All right. Our first item to discuss is proposed FY 2022 city special event schedule. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. I'll introduce the item. I'll ask our Parks and Recs Director to come up, but I will give a preface to this. I think it's vitally important that the city is uniform as far as its request for events on a yearly basis. It has to be understood that every event that has a budgetary impact in marketing fees, personnel, and various other city items that are city resources that are used. So I asked the city commission to look at this calendar in a way, number one, based on our new special events policy, you guys have to vote on a calendar on a yearly basis. And number two, really take some thoughtful be thoughtful in taking time and looking at your events and what events you want to hold on a yearly basis. And let's get them placed on the calendar sometime this month. I know it's an agenda item for the 14th. If it needs to be deferred to the next commission meeting, that's fine, but it has to be decided on by budget time because it has a budgetary impact and we have to make sure we tie that budgetary impact into the budget. Understand that once the calendar is approved and the budgetary impact is done, that any additional events has to come through me and I have to approve them in a very thoughtful way, meaning I have to look at the impact it's going to have on the community as well as the financial impact it's going to have on the budget for adding an additional event. If the city commission's will, there's two ways we can do it. I can approve it and make the proper approvals to the addition to the calendar, or if the commission wants the calendar to come back to them for further approval, that's fine too. But that is something that needs to be discussed next week. But I just want to kind of discuss the calendar holistically. In saying that, I do not recommend that the city has four events a month or 3 events a month. I prefer that the city has 2 or less events per month. I know in some of these events right now on the calendar, there's 4 events here. I would like to slim this down. How the calendar was created is we looked at previous events that everybody had and introduced, and we added to the calendar. The commission can take away from those events because most of these events are commission events that we just adopted as city events. So if you guys want to add or take away from the calendar, we can discuss that as well, and we'll give you guys some thoughtful time to do that. But understand, it's a budgetary impact, and we want to make sure that we are good stewards of the government's funds. And I will have to be honest with you, we have not been good stewards of the government's funds when it comes to special events since I've been here the year and a half plus I've been here. I don't feel that we've been good stewards of the government's money, in that we have a lot of pop-up events that are unbudgeted that occur. Now, in preference, the events in July, some of them are covered through COVID monies and other resources and anti-violence campaigns. And I believe those things are very noteworthy activities to have. And those are things that I would approve if they're not on the calendar. But I just want to be direct because, when these requests come in, they come in through the legislative aid, they come to me, and I'm kind of heartbroken to say, no, you can't have an event, because I want everybody to realize their dream. But I think hopefully this calendar situation will help us control it, because my marketing costs are off the chain. So I just want to say that, and sorry to use slang at the end of my presentation. Thank you.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. We just want to be better organized when it comes to events, so we can know what we're doing for the entire year. We don't just want events just to pop up. We just want to be better prepared. Like I said, it's for budget issues and for personnel issues as well, so we could be prepared for the upcoming events that the city has.
So the discussion is, first, you guys never set a dollar amount and what you all want to be allocated per year as far as budgetary funds for your events that you sponsor. So we need to discuss that. And then from there, I come up with the event budget with Bob and Ms. Mockins. So we come up with that, but we need to discuss what you all want to put in the budget for you all's individual events, because that has to be tracked in the system. So every time you have an event, we deduct from that dollar amount. So, but you all never decided on a dollar amount when we had that workshop and when we ultimately approved the special events policy. So I will give the floor to the mayor at this time to start discussion.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Manager. I'm glad to hear the acknowledgement of these events and the challenge we had in coordinating those. I know it's the will of each of us on this day is to do events that our community wants and that can benefit our community. And many times due to sunshine, we are unaware of other people's events and what's going on. So we do look to legislative aid and also especially yourself in managing and making sure that those decisions are cost effective. And yeah, so you can please feel free to speak to us about those cost effective measures to make sure that many multiple events are not happening. Like, we need to know that and know what's going on. So the first thing before we get into and I open up the floor, the first question you asked is that we need to discuss an event budget. And I know the budget discussion is coming up after this, but how much is available for this and what is the reasonable range that we can properly allocate? We are in a financial crisis at this moment. We do have a lot of financial challenges. We are uncertain when it comes to our actuals right now due to the work in finance. So right now, what is that anticipated range that we can even debate about and discuss?
So my advice and guidance is that I don't believe a commission member should have more than $5,000 to be allocated towards the event. Now, mind you, I believe the first and second year, or either the first year of the special events policy, calls for personnel cost not to be allocated. So understand that we're talking about this budget year. The next budget year, I may tell you 10,000. I may tell you 20. I don't know. Well, I'm telling you, Mr. Mayor, I never get that high. But, but at this point, I'm at 5,000. That's where I'm at. And I want you all to be cognizant that you all don't have to pay for personnel costs this year. Now, the next year, you do have to pay for personnel costs out your money. So in saying that, get you a good volunteer squad. Get you a good squad of volunteers around you. And they have to come through the city. They have to get properly reviewed and processed, go through the background process, be registered as volunteer. If they're going to be out there and they're saying, I'm a volunteer for the vice mayor, I'm the volunteer for Vice Mayor Veronica Williams, they better have came to the city and register as a volunteer and go through the background process as a volunteer. If they're out there wearing your shirt with your name on it. Now, if you got residents that's just helping out, fine. If you have residents that are So we're doing things different in Opa-locka. So once we do this whole special events policy, things are gonna be more structured. I'll do a structured memo. People that are cooking for you need to have a background check. People that serve food on your behalf need to have a proper background check through the city. So anybody that's doing volunteer work, that's actually doing work for you, and they're touching residents and they're giving out food and they're saying they're doing on behalf of the city of Opa-locka or anything like that, proper background checks need to be done. Now, criminal histories are not going to be a disqualifier. I review all criminal histories and I make a reasonable judgment on how long the offense occurred prior to the day's day. If it's something happened 10 or 20 years ago, as long as it's not homicide, I'm not jumping up and down about something. That's not going to preclude somebody from necessarily being a volunteer. But if we're going to do it right, we need a good group of you guys need a good group of volunteers that need to be registered with the city, and then they can work on your behalf out here for your events. And that cuts staff time and staff that's needed to be out here to kind of do things. You know, I want to get to a point where if we have an event, all staff needs to do is come and open the door. They need to come and open the door, maybe have one person in the building to monitor the building. If you need staff participation, like you need parks and like a big event, we're here. But smaller events, you don't need personnel, we need to look at that. But the answer to the question to the mayor is 5,000. We're looking at this year, 5,000 per commission. At this point, you guys approve the budget. So if you guys say more and debate more, then I have to find the money and I have to cut somewhere. That's fine. But I'm advising $5,000. If that answers your question, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry to get in that diatribe of statement.
Yeah, I wanted to be clear on that. One of the reasons I've have not been sponsoring events since I've been on this day, as I came on this day, is during the financial crisis. And the special events budget was the first thing that was completely cut. And it was completely cut to where we didn't have any events until about last year. Events started to come back online. So I just wanted to be clear about what that amount is. And right now I'm kind of looking at, because 25,000 for special events sounds like quite a bit. But looking back in 2013, when right before a lot of this stuff started happening, it is at 25,000. So while we're here in this financial crisis, do you believe that the state would approve 5,000 per commission and 25,000 general for special events with where we are in this financial oversight?
So let me throw a caveat out there. So to give you a wide 10,000 foot view, because that's where we're at on this day. It's 10,000 foot, right? The state approved for us to have a PR and marketing person on our staff with a budget with a $60,000 salary or budget, along with additional monies to use for PR related resources for the city, printing and flyers and balloons and decorations and things for events. So I think we're close to $100,000, Bob. For Ms. Mockins is 60,000. And then how much is it? 20 or $30,000 additional for?
Very quickly, Bob, Jonathan. The budget was set up, I think 60 for her and 35 for the bells and whistles that went with it. And I don't think she's close to that.
She's not. No. Understand. I understand that. But so the dollar amount is $95,000. She's not even close to that. The state approved that. So let's look at that. Okay. When I talk about you all having $5,000 each, this doesn't include Ms. Mockins' time. This doesn't include flyers. Does not include PR. That doesn't include that. The commission already approved a contract with a PR person. We already approved the budget last year for $95,000, $60,000 for the salary for staff time for Ms. Mockins' people, $35,000 for bells and whistles and all that. The state approved it because they felt the city was in a little bit better financial position, number one. Number two, every time I talk to the state, they always ask me, what are you guys doing for the residents? What are you guys doing for the residents? That's the question I'm asked. Even when we talk about the budget, we talk about police service, you know, we talk about public works, we talk about flooding, resident impact. What's the resident impact? And so the state is like, we need to do more for our residents. Since we've been in financial emergency, what have we done for our residents? So they approved the PR contract. They approved the additional $35,000 for advertising. Okay. So when I'm talking $5,000 with you all, I'm not talking about that. That's already budgeted. That's already in a pot of money. So it doesn't include that. Your $5,000 includes like food, things are not PR related, supplies,
Yeah, just goods and services.
goods and services.
Yes.
Is really, if you want a popcorn machine, or if you want to do cotton candy, the rental of that stuff, you know. So $5,000 is a lot of money if we're just talking about goods and services, because the city already has a budget for PR and marketing, okay? And that's including you guys going on a radio station and all that to promote your events. All that is in a separate pot of money, okay? I said $5,000 because that was what was given previously to the commission, and I think a lower amount will be kind of ridiculous. I think going 2,500 would be insulting. I don't believe if I gave I truly in my heart, since I know each and one of you guys like intimately, I don't think you guys are gonna go through a $25,000 budget as far as goods and services for your events. Because a lot of you guys are very frugal when you guys have your events. You guys are very cognizant. You guys get in-kind donations from other places. So it really doesn't impact the city. So even if I gave you guys $5,000 a piece and that's in the budget, I don't believe you guys are gonna use it. But that's just a baseline amount that I'm starting with. If the commission or the mayor feels that lower, we can talk about a lower amount and we can debate it at this time. I'm open to it. Based on that 10,000 foot analysis and knowing that marketing is not included and Ms. Mocking services is not included, do you all feel $5,000 is a lot?
Mr. Manager, Mr. Mayor,
Vice Mayor Williams.
earlier you stated that you're picking up the overtime for the employees. The first year, yes, which is this year, correct?
Yes. So
Okay.
the year we're talking, the year we're talking about now, so the special events policy was just approved.
22.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this next budget year is what we're
Okay,
talking
so in
about.
22.
Yes.
That will be picked up.
Yes.
My question is, what is that accrual of that you've already had to pay for certain, for police, for Parks and Rec, so does that budget come out to be actually more than what you've provided us? I mean, actually, I'm okay with this, what you've allocated personally.
So
Because I spent about half of that out of my own pocket, but I'm saying, how then are the other parts, we're going $20,000 or $5,000 a piece or $25,000, but then the city now is picking up or having to pay $50,000 for employees that are now having to attend the events. That's what I'm wondering.
I'm going to have Mr. Anthony come up. I don't believe that we spend an aggressive amount of money in regards to staff time. For example, a standard off duty for a police officer is $50 an hour. For them to work overtime is typically at a cheaper rate. You guys have your events on no more than 4 hours, 2 to 4 hours. So we're talking about a couple $100.
Okay, so it's not, okay.
Yeah, we're talking about a
okay.
couple. So I'm just giving you an
Yeah, so
analogy
it's
based on
not
using a
like
police
going
officer.
over the
No, it's not
budget
like
you're
every
getting. Okay.
event using $1,000 for staff. It's not that.
Okay.
for an average event, you guys maybe use $500 of staff time with police and parks and everybody, and that's an overtime. If it's the weekend, it's overtime. Even based on the overtime rate that we pay, you're not paying. I don't think you guys spend more than $500 because your events don't last more than 4 hours. Now, when you guys are talking about a full day event and it's a large event, then we're talking thousands of dollars for staff time because I need 8 officers and 4 parks people. And that when you talk about magnitude of large events, that's what we talk about. Now, here's the thing. You all need to determine what's a city event and what's a Commissioner Taylor event, what's a Mayor Pygott event, what's a Vice Mayor event, what's a Commissioner Davis event, right? We need to determine that. If it's a city event, I'm not taking that out your $5,000. It's a city event. Like, for example, this weekend, all you all co-sponsoring this event with the police. I consider it a city event at this point because all you all are participating in the event. If there's a flyer, the rule is, if there's a flyer where I see less than 5 people on, then it's an individual event. If I see a flyer where it's 5 of you all on it, it's a city event. You all have to determine that as a part of the calendar. What's going to be a city event and what's going to be your individual niche. What I don't want to take from is your individuality as an elected official. Because I think each one of you all are required to have your level of individuality as an elected official. So I want you all to have your event. What is your event? What is going to be the event that you're going to sponsor that's going to be powerful and thoughtful, and we can have 100 residents show up and make it happen? You know, you got to think about that. So just put that in your thought process too when we look at the special event calendar.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner Taylor.
Okay, you talked about the difference between city events and personal commission events, if you will. For example, January, MLK Day, I was supposed to sponsor it this year, right?
So we consider that a city event.
But then you talked about flyers. So if my picture is on the flyer only, not saying that's what I want, just if my picture's on the flyer only, then it's a personal event. Even though the city has been doing that event since I was.
So
Before I was
how I look at it, because I go through these events all the time. Okay. If it's an event that is your niche and you consider it your event and everybody agrees it's your event, because I don't think nobody up here debates against one another up here on this dais. Is your event. If you want MLK to be your event and everybody agrees to it, it's your event.
No, you're missing what I'm saying. How does that determine whether it's a city event or my event?
You guys tell me.
If I'm the host. So MLK is an event that has already been established since Commissioner Kelly. And then when he left, I tried to take it on. So if I take it on, is that my event?
No, I consider
we
we already consider certain events to be city events. MLK is considered to be a city event.
That's what I was asking.
Because it's
Anything
historical.
added?
Because it's historical.
So
events so what we try to do to make this calendar easier, okay, what you see listed is events that we have had since I've been here, and we listed the events. Some events are listed, Commissioner so-and-so, Commissioner this person, X, Y, and Z, because the previous event was sponsored by that person based on our knowledge, because we don't have historical knowledge. I only have knowledge of what I've been here since I've been here. Okay? Some of that has been changed because we discovered some events were co-sponsored. So we added 2 people. Okay? What we're trying to do is we need to identify events that we're going to consider a city event, and I'm going to tell you why. Events that we consider city events, number one, doesn't come out you all's budget. It comes out of the PR and special events budget that the city has. City's gonna have a separate pot for city events. So it doesn't come out your budget, and you all are participating, and this thing is rallied, and we put money into it, and you guys are all participating, we all are coordinating together to make the event happen. Since I've been here, the only, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, because I could be. Since I've been here, the only event that I've seen that's a city event that has really been a city event is the MLK Walk, even though Commissioner Taylor sponsored it last time. It wasn't a walk, it was virtual, but I think if we would have had it in person, all you all would have showed up to it. And all you all would have walked and had something to do, and it's historical. It's historic to Opa-locka, okay? And then I see the event that's occurring this weekend with the police department and the outreach you were doing with the police department, how all you all are involved in that event. I see that as a city event because it's public safety related and it's a general outreach to the entire community and it touches everybody. But I don't want to sit here and define what city event and what city, not a city event, because I don't want to insult anybody on the dais. There may be events that you say is your niche, and I don't want to sit here and make it a city event when you like, this is my event. I want to spearhead this event. I'm passionate about it. I want to coordinate it every year. The other commissioners can participate, but I want to be the host of the event. So I don't want to insult anybody. So that's where we get the kind of sensitivity piece.
Mr. Manager, I'm hearing two different things. I just need you to be careful because if there are also traditional events, such as the Mother's Day that was started many, many years ago, that we can easily say is a traditional city event. So I think what you may want to do is like really look at the events and say what you think is the city event, because right now it's like, this is.
That's fine, I can make
Kelly
decisions.
started, and I get it because that is traditional, what was, happened. And we know because his mother started that event and, carried it on. But technically that was a former Commissioner Kelly's event, correct?
Correct. But I'm trying to get away from that.
No. I agree. I understand what you're doing. I'm just saying what you're saying. It was complicated. It sounded a little complicated.
So at the end of the day, if you all don't want to decide what's a city event and what's not a city event, me and the Parks and Records Department be more than happy to make that decision. I'll take it. I'll take on that responsibility. I'll consult with the clerk as well because she's been here for a while. And we'll notate what's a city event and what we feel is not a city event. And we'll go through it and we'll present it to you all. And we'll revise the calendar. We'll present it to you guys. And then from there, if you guys have any changes you want to make, then we'll just make them at that time.
Have you have we looked at other cities like Miami Gardens? I do know, their districts. So and they have their own budget also. But have we looked at how that process works for them also? Like, have we looked?
No,
What
no.
their city manager? Okay, I'm just wondering.
Mr. Anthony?
Okay.
Excuse me for butting in again. I was involved in the development of the special event policy that you approved early this year. I would have thought, my expectation was that if tonight anything you put on the calendar as a city event would in fact be a city event, and that any event that didn't rise to that level tonight would therefore be a commissioner event. So I thought the defining event would be tonight, you would define what you want on as city events, and anything other than that would be an individual commissioner event. Hopefully that helps.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we agreed upon, was that we will propose a list of events that we will put forth for the year and then have additional events. But I do want to kind of circle back and kind of recenter this conversation. As you know, I've been part of this dais, and this special events has been a very touchy subject. And I just did some research to look back at where we were before the financial crisis and since we've been in this financial crisis. And at the time, we traditionally had events that were done by the Parks and Recreation, which we call city events, which are listed on this list here. And those events generally total between $25,000 to $35,000 a year for these events. And then there is a budget that was at discretion of the city manager to approve certain events. Since 2016, all special events have been completely zeroed out, except the state of the city, because that's the only charter required event that we're to have. So right now, to hear that not only are we going back to funding these events here, back to pre-crisis rates, we're also providing an additional $25,000 on top of that. I'm trying to figure out how did we get to this point to where we are comfortable allocating that money, and is the state also okay with that, because we've proposed this in the past and they've wiped it out. So what's the thinking behind this year? Like, what makes us as a city in a position to where we can refund those events that we traditionally have, and also add an additional $25,000, and that the state is also in alignment with that? What's the logic behind that?
So this is the logic. First, you all have been having events and I have been authorizing them, and they've been paid for out the budget. The events that you see on the calendar, those events happened. We paid for them. The state was aware of them. They were fine with the funding of those events. That's number one. Number two, as I go back, we had a PR person that some people up here on this day has championed, and she's outstanding, that has a $60,000 salary and the additional $35,000 of miscellaneous funds for goods and services related to PR services. That was in this year's budget, the current budget. Wasn't in previous budgets before. That hasn't been approved by the state. The state has an understanding of what our events are and how much we spend on our events. They approve the budget, they see the expenditures that go on. We just passed a policy, you all did, just passed a policy that you agreed that you all will have individual budgets. If we would like to bring back that policy and remove that section, I'm perfectly fine with that. So I have to fund it because you all approved a mandate, a policy where you requested yourselves to have a budget. I felt that it was insulting to start at a number less than 5,000. Again, as I state, if you all feel, or if Mr. Mayor feels that amount should be less or zeroed out, we can do that. And we can still have these events, but understand that I'm going beyond what's on that calendar. Anything beyond that is going to be no, I can't fund it. I can't do it. I don't have the resources. If everybody's okay with that and there's not going to be any complaints, we can start cutting numbers. I don't have a problem doing that, but you all mandated an amount for yourselves. So I'm trying to fulfill that mandate. Now, again, $95,000 for PR and marketing. That's never happened in Opa-locka, not to that extent. Okay, you all approved the budget. The budget was approved by the state. I'm adding an additional $5,000 for each one of you. That's $25,000. We have a policy. It has to be presented to the state. The state can zero it out. You guys can agree to $5,000 or $2,500. If the budget comes back zeroed out, it's zeroed out. I don't believe it's going to be, but I think the city's in a better financial condition than it was back then, years ago when we went to financial emergency. I look forward to what this audit says about 2019, but I'm not going to say anything out loud about that until the audit's released on Friday, about the financial shape we're in 2019. So what I'm saying is, Mr. Mayor, I am your city manager. I am the commission city manager. If you guys want me to make cuts, if you guys don't want the 5,000, tell me 0, 2,500 or 1,000, tell me that. That's why I'm here. We have to make that decision tonight. It has to be input in the budget. If you guys don't want certain events on there and you feel they're not city events or these are individual events or you don't want them at all, please tell me. I will remove them from the calendar. The calendar is created based on events we've had in the past. Nobody was trying to be disrespectful and remove anybody's events. But if you want to remove some and feel there's too much, it's going to be too expensive, that is your choice as well. I seek your guidance. In whatever direction we go, we can go.
Just for a point of clarity, I have not said anything about the amount except the fact that looking at the past, and two, when we championed the PR person, we were in a international pandemic, and the main reason why it was approved and that amount was approved was to do the messaging around COVID and also to do things in terms of the city. And we added on last minute to also coordinate events. So it's important to understand that our PR person budget encompasses all city things, including pandemic. Am I incorrect in that, Mr. Manager?
Mr. Mayor, the PR person was brought in before this current budget year at a limited contract to address pandemic-related matters. You're right, the contract was expanded, and there is a full budget year here at 95,000. If you want to go back and look at the PR's total budget since PR has been here, it's over $120,000 if you calculate what we spent before September. So yes, PR was initially brought here to champion COVID. Yes, we championed that. We got the messaging out. When the PRs presented to the state this budget year, they have full knowledge that included all city events, including COVID. And I can ask Ms. Marcus how much we spent on COVID, and I assure you it's not a lot of money that we spent on COVID this year. Most of the money went to events. I believe I had an $8,000 bill for services alone for the month of July for your events in July, and another bill for $7,000 projected for the month of August for PR. So, Mr. Mayor, you are correct in some instances, but I just want to give the whole picture.
Got it. All right. Any other discussion on events?
We got to get a dollar amount. You guys got to say a dollar amount.
I agree with the manager's recommendation. I don't know if my colleagues more or less.
I'm good with the 5.
Yeah, I'm fine. I think definitely having a calendar is, I know for me, is going to help moving forward, because I think we just, and that's just who I am. I work backwards, so I can't, just, have stuff popping up. So I do appreciate the calendar, and I'm okay with the budget.
Okay. Any other discussion on special events?
Mr. Mayor, when is the process going to take place when we, I guess, as a commission, vote on those items that we wish to be city events?
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Mr. Manager?
So it's slated to be on the July 14th agenda, but I'm perfectly fine for the matter to be on the agenda and deferred if the 14th comes about. And there's some additional research or work that members of the commission wants to do as far as research on the calendar. I'm fine for the matter to be deferred to the last meeting in July, even though it's cutting it close. I'm fine with that because I need you all to define this calendar, because once you vote aye or not to approve it, it's locked in. So if there's any additions or subtractions, if you need more than a week from today, just signal that during the commission meeting, and we'll do what we need to do to accommodate you all until the next commission meeting.
And when you say addition or subtraction, you asking for those city events as well as personal events?
Yeah, so I want you to look at the calendar and events that you feel that should not be on there, or there are one-time events and they're not going to happen again next year or years to come, to remove them. Okay. Again, what's on there is defined as city events, but I understand some of you all may be passionate about what you do. So if you all want us to redefine them as individual events, we'll keep them on the calendar, but they just be redefined as individual events. At the end of the day, addition, subtraction, what's your event, what's not your event, what's a city event? That's basically what I'm asking.
Yeah.
And I cannot make that decision for you all, even though you all are asking me. The city events, I've made that decision. They're pretty much everything is on there. But if there is events that you feel should be your own event that I put down as a city event, make that change. Let me know that you want that change made. And add what you want. And then you guys debate about it, subtract it, add it, agree, and then you vote on it. And then it's locked, just understand it's locked in. Any decision I make in regards to the calendar has to be an extenuating circumstance, a special thing, like something occurred in Opa-locka or in the community, and we absolutely need to have an event. It has to be that level of urgency for me to say, okay, add the event. So I ask you all to do homework. Thank you.
All right. There are two events I think we should consider making a part of the city. One, I believe it's important us have like a social services summit to where we identify and give the opportunity for many of the nonprofits and social services that after school programs, mentoring programs, to have a day in which they come out, set up vendor tables, and we really push to make sure that the people of Opa-locka are clear about all the social services and opportunities that are available to them, and give those nonprofits an ability to share that and what they do. And so that's one event I think I would love for us to do as a city. And then the second is a business summit where we provide opportunity for our local small businesses to do the same as the social services, to come out, showcase their wares. There are a lot of amazing companies here in the city of Opa-locka that do not get their just due in terms of attention. And I think it would be awesome for us as a city to provide them a platform to recognize, and maybe during those events we can do an award for top business, most recognizable business in the city, or top social service nonprofit doing work, so that we can encourage them to go above and beyond and win some type of title or champion for doing excellent business and providing excellent services in the city of Opa-locka. So that's one event I think that we should do as a city on a regular basis.
Mr. Mayor, I do agree. That totally makes sense to do. Mr. Manager, do you want us to just email you the recommendations?
Please, and I'll
There's-
filter them through the Parks Department.
Oh, so, Mr. Patterson?
You send them to
Oh.
me, and I'll send them out to the parks.
Oh,
We'll
got
update
it.
the
Okay.
calendar, we update everything, and highlight what was added, what was removed, and all that, and we'll just discuss it at the next meeting.
Okay, no problem. Thanks.
So for this events that we propose, that's something that is going to just be sent and then it's compiled, and then I guess at the next meeting we're going to debate on, or are we going to kind of streamline that stuff now?
No, I think you all first, I think the calendar first, the calendar was supposed to be sent out to you all for you all's input. Based on talking to the mayor today, the calendar was sent to you all just to view. You guys weren't requested for input. You guys were supposed to be requested for your input on the calendar. So by now, I would have hoped input would have been provided so we can talk about it today, but that was not the message that was put out. So that's why I said, we're looking for your input, provide it to me, and we can debate it on the 14th. Because at this point, for us to talk about events right now, while we got a budget workshop that we need to do, I think would be unproductive. So we have opportunity to extend this past the 14th if we need to. I would not want to, but if we need to, we can. But we're going to keep it on the agenda. And if it needs to be deferred, we'll defer it.
Any other comments on special events?
Mr. Mayor, do you agree with the 5,000 amount?
No, I don't believe we should be doing 5,000 at this time.
Do you have a proposed dollar amount?
Excuse me?
Do you have a proposed dollar amount?
It's the will of the commission has already been set. Any other discussion on this item?
I'm gonna be really quick. I'm sorry. Mr. Pate, so there are things on this calendar that we know are staple. There are also things that are happening just like right now. For example, the 2 events I'm having in August, this isn't a staple. These aren't staples here in our community. We're just, you get what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
do
so
I
then,
remove
so
this?
no, there's no, so keep them there.
Okay.
Consider them individual events that
That's-
you're
that's
having.
what I'm
So
asking.
keep
Okay.
them on there, mark them as individual events, one-time event. Just mark it down there and just when you respond, just put that
Okay.
on there and we'll make sure we notate it.
Okay, so I'll just send my recommendations.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
No problem, thanks.
And that's for any of you that sees events that you only know is going to be one time, and just mark it as an individual event and we'll mark it as that.
Any other discussion on events? All right, let's move on to our next agenda item on the proposed FY 2022 budget. Mr. Manager?
Mr. Anathan, it's your time.
Good evening. Get set up. This. Bob Anathan, budget. Good evening. To quote Commissioner Davis, gee, the book's a lot smaller this year. He's right. And let me try and explain why. As I told somebody tonight, I found myself doing things for the budget at the end of May this year that I did February last year. The difference was that we managed to have an operational audit that kicked off in the latter part of March. And to be very candid, it probably sucked the oxygen out of the room for way too long. So my proposal tonight, I hope for your indulgence, is that what I'd like to share with you is the overview as I see it. And I'll put some caveats on that in a moment. I owe you a budget book. There will be a budget book within the next 10 days. I have proposed to the manager that we have a for real workshop on the 21st, which will give you still time to allow us to make any adjustments that are necessary for the 28th. So yes, the book's a lot smaller tonight. I wish we could do better, but it's been a brutal spring so far, and this is where I've gotten to. So with that, what I'd like to do is take you through the overview. I will tell you that it's 55 pages in the presentation. I really plan to stop at slide 23. You have behind there, I put a tab in each of your books. It has a lot of divisional information. It truly, I don't believe, is worth going through tonight. I think you may want to look at it when you get your budget books within, let's say, 10 to 12 days. It will amplify this information considerably, but at least it's there tonight for anybody who wants to look ahead. So my proposal is I'll address the first 23 slides to give you an overview, and if whatever direction that generates, that'll be terrific. But if you'll indulge me, we will not get into it a division by division, line by line. When you think tonight, we spent somewhere around 45 minutes on one line item, and there are probably 1,000 line items. Probably don't want to go there. Way too long. So with that, Nelson, thank you. Actually, I have a pointer tonight, so I'm in business. Okay. Let me give you a couple caveats first, if I may. Again, as you've heard many times, and you'll hear it again tonight, the numbers, the FY9 audit has not been formally completed. I have had the privilege of having several drafts provided to me that I have incorporated to the best I understand, but again, they have not been approved and they will not be approved until you see them on Friday night. But from the drafts that are available, and I'm assuming there are no major changes, the world has changed quite a bit from what we talked about a year ago, and I'll try and get into that. Highlights tonight, these are a few of the highlights. I'm probably going to get some people mad at me because I have not picked up all of them. This was the low-hanging fruit, but this basically is what the budget is based on. Your police department, as you'll see in the resources that we look at tonight, it's a whole different organization that you had last August. I think you know that, so I'm not going to waste any more time on it. You'll see it in terms of the numbers, in terms of the staff, in terms of the resources to be recommended, allocated to it, and so forth. Another thing, and I think you got a little taste of it tonight, you've got a totally reorganized Parks and Recreation program. And you'll see that again in the staffing, you'll see that again in the recommended resources to be applied to it. City beautification, we're not prepared to talk to tonight in the level of detail you want. It's been partially reflected in the budget. It'll be reflected certainly by the time you see it in 2 weeks. You've heard the discussion about ERPS, ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning System. It really is the central software system that ties the city together practically in every aspect and just moves information back and forth without any problems. That's a major activity of the city. Investment has not ceased. As you will see, Carter Lane is going to end up in next year's budget. Also give acknowledgement to the historic City Hall, the historic fire station, the first leg on whatever is involved in the police station and so forth. That's one of the underpinnings of this budget. Finance department, you know what the issues are. The budget assumes those are corrected for next year. The budget will show, and we'll take a quick look at it. There's a lot of grant money being used for FY22. Some which are recent, some of which are older grant money having to do with the water and sewer improvements and so forth. We'll look at that. I actually have something in there which is an operational audit item. We've put $50,000 in there to get a facilitator for the strategic plan. A necessary ingredient of any city. We have found, the city actually did use a facilitator in 2014. Most cities do use it to make sure they get a really solid product that really pulls out what needs to be done. So we put that in there. Building licensing has been an issue of some concern. There's going to be a tremendous amount of automation. We won't talk to it tonight, but that is one of the highlights of the budget. CRA project, we'll cover that very quickly tonight, but just a reminder, CRA is really a separate organization. You get to look at it in your role as board members, you certainly get to act on it, but it's not something that's directly acted upon by the commission. So we'll look at it, but again, it's going to be up to the CRA board to do it as they think is appropriate with it. And the last issue, I'm going to share what I think is a tremendous amount of good news with you tonight. The one cloud on the horizon is the water sewer fund, and we'll spend some time looking at that. So that's kind of a view at 40,000 feet, if you will. Please. The points I'd like to make here, again, we're dealing with unaudited numbers, certainly for 20 and 21. I don't think they're without foundation. I'll share with you the source of them, but as you're going to see, there's some rather dramatic changes from what we talked about a year ago. Let me just take you around the screen, if I may. This is a city overview. It's really only useful just to understand the full magnitude of the money that's being spent. You're not going to take much away from this other than just realize that the budget's saying that within, for the proposed FY22 budget as it stands right now, bottom line, we're talking about $52,000, 52 and change. But just a reminder, part of that is money that's just being moved from one fund to another, the transfer in, transfer out. That's about $8.7 million. And again, this is just for education. Just remember that doesn't cost the city anything. It's just moving money from the general fund to a capital fund and vice versa. So the true expenditure that is being recommended this time is approximately 44 million, which would be the 52 less the 8.7. You can see I made reference before to grants and loans within there. We're talking about such things as the police station. We're also talking about a fair amount of grants and loans in water and sewer. Not surprisingly, when you look where the money's being spent, you can see there's a fair amount that is going towards employee compensation.
Mr. Anderson, just for clarity.
Yeah,
Those points, the number in front of it, that's on million, and number four, that's
Thank you. I
1,000, right?
mentioned
So
that. I thought to mention
when I
that.
see that under grants, that means there's 2.4 million in grants.
Yes, and I apologize.
And for those that have 0.1, like in the forecast, that means 100,000.
That's correct, and I do apologize. What I've done here, if it's a page that's got a lot of numbers and a lot of big numbers, as you pointed out, it is in the millions. Most of the pages are down at the dollar level, but sometimes when you have too many big numbers on one page, it's just too hard to focus. So I am moving back and forth, and thank you for keeping me honest on that one. I do apologize.
Just for those that are following along, I want to make sure that they.
Yes, sir. That was truly my oversight.
Oh, you're good. Thank you.
The other points I would make is, and this is a very significant thing, and you'll see it primarily in the general fund. When you see a negative number in the use of fund balance, what that's telling you is you actually had a surplus of revenue over how you chose to expend your dollars. So that's actually adding to your fund balance, first and foremost, to the general fund. And we'll see that in more detail when we look at it. The other thing that I would just point out with you is all other things being equal, we're certainly continuing with our capital investment. You can see the 6.3 in the forecast, 8.7 is being proposed for next year. And one other thing that you'll see as a theme is you're going to see large contingencies because we have a lot of things going on. We have, as you know from earlier this evening, we're in negotiations with a couple of unions. That's not reflecting your compensation numbers at this point because we don't know what there's going to be. So to address that, what I've done is you have a much larger than usual contingency. So you'll see that tonight as well. As I said, FY20, FY21 are not audited, but they are not totally random numbers either. We see anything that's done with the purchase order, we actually see the expenditures. So a lot of the expense we do see. For a while, we've had trouble getting the compensation into the accounts. It's pretty much there at this point, but I've put together compensation models. It's down at the employee level, worries about it, whether it's a 40-hour, 42-hour, and so forth. So anytime a person leaves, I get notification from HR to change it if somebody gets promoted. So the compensation model is not accounting accurate, but it puts us in the right ballpark. That's a long-winded way of saying that, yeah, the numbers are not audited, but they're not off the walls either. So I think they're not unreasonable, and we'll find out as the follow-on audits get done. Please. The purpose of this page is really only just to remind you how we manage our finances.
Just really quick clarity on
I'm
this
sorry.
prior page.
Yes,
So
sir.
just general overall,
Sorry.
our budget is being decreased from 21 to 22 by what, 800,000?
That would not be total surprise. You had an awful lot of grant activity in 21. You had, through the various CARES thing, you had about $4 million of revenue from the county, a lot of which was offset by cash cards and so forth. The answer is yes.
Okay,
You
yeah,
had,
so
you had some awful lot of one-time expexpenditures this year, current year FY21.
all right, so that's what I was concerned about because just the year before that, we were at a $34 million budget. And I know that due to CARES Act and coronavirus, there was a huge infusion of different cash and all that. So how are we expecting that same? Are we expecting that same amount of infusion, or approximately this year? Like, how do we get so much more?
When you say this year, you're talking
Well,
21,
yeah,
20,
for this
22?
for the next budget cycle. Are we expecting the same amount of infusion, less 800,000?
No, sir. It might be more helpful if you'll defer that question till we look at some of the major funds.
Thank you.
Because, I mean, for example, general fund revenue will be up. Well, I'll take that back. Take out the grant revenue and general fund revenue will be up. But there's a lot of action from fund to fund, and it's probably more useful to look at each fund, if you will, please. Okay. Any other questions on this slide, please? The purpose of this slide is only just to remind you how we manage our finances. As you know, we use funds. You can see I've listed them from the more important ones to the less important ones. General fund is where most of the activity is, other than usually enterprise funds, which are water and sewer funds. And you can see the relative importance of each. So long story short, as we talked about before, 52.7 on the bottom line. It goes very quickly from the major funds to the lesser funds that are there to serve a function but are not a primary financial impact. Nelson, please. Thank you. Okay. Now at this point, I probably will get accused of smoking something, but this is what I'm looking at. Just to reset you, a year ago, we were looking at FY18. Again, I'm going to focus on general fund balance. A year ago, at the end of FY18, we understood the general fund available fund balance to be negative $4 million. And we put a 5-year plan together, took a lot of, it was a very lean organization. And by the time we got to the 5th year, I think we had a surplus of 4.5 million. We have a threshold of 3.3 million. So this is a totally different world. And again, this is my assessment of the information I have available to me, not because it's been validated by an audit or accounting verification and so forth. But the first thing that happened, and again, this is talking from draft, is that they looked at the general fund for FY19. And again, based on the draft that I saw up to 2 days ago, there was a $5 million improvement in fund balance in general fund. So the tremendous hole that we were looked at suddenly got papered over and it actually put us slightly positive. Second thing that's happened was FY20. Every time that I was on my feet up here at the podium, I would say, I think it's going to be a very good year. And I was thinking in the range of 4 to 5 million. Based on what I'm seeing this year, what I'm seeing at this point for FY20, it looks like it's close to a $7 million surplus. Good things happen. We got the extra couple $1 million of property tax revenue. We got the banks to release the $2.6 million that they had held back. But we continue, even though we had more revenue, we continued to spend at the FY19 level. So last year, I believe, was a really good year. Took the adjusted base that I think is going to be announced on Friday, built it on top of it, and suddenly we were looking really good. And this year, again, thanks quite candidly to the CARES Act, looks like we're going to have a surplus of another couple $1 million. So when you put all those numbers together, we're suddenly looking at close to $10 million at surplus at this point. And again, these are Bob's numbers, but if I'm wrong, I'm not going to be wrong by $10 million. I can guarantee you that. Now, what does this mean? When you have available fund balance, the financial rules or the use of it, you can use it whenever you want as long as you don't go below your threshold of 3.3 million, but you can only use it for one-time things. You cannot use it to fund 5 additional positions that are going to run for the next 5 years and so forth. So the only purpose of what I'm trying to say at this point is this gives you flexibility to start to do one-time things that we didn't know about before. Now, it's not a mandate to go spend $7 million, but it just says we do have flexibility in terms of general fund expenditures. Brief education on the tax base based on the information that the property appraiser distributed as of July 1st. Property tax base is 1.32 billion, which is up 6.6%. And that's good news. The 5-year plan assumed it was going to be a very tough year in real estate and went flat. So this is much better than what we had in the 5-year plan. But not all property tax is created equal. It breaks into 2 parts, real property tax and personal property tax. Personal property tax is good for a reason I'll tell you in a moment. real property tax actually went up 8.4%. So the average property owner in the city saw an increase of 8.4%. That's 80% of your tax base. The other 20% is primarily personal property. That has to do with all the machinery and equipment and other stuff that businesses have in place. And in this case, read it to say Amazon, because Amazon owns a good piece of that number. The good news is it's been very helpful to get us from FY19 to FY20. The bad news, it doesn't grow that much from year to year. So, you know, the real property has been growing and no reason why it won't keep growing. But since personal property is a portion of our tax base, it's going to hold down the total growth a little bit. Just a fun fact. The one piece of bad news that came out of the information we got on July 1st is one thing that we look at each year is what were the new additions to the tax base, not the growth in the existing tax base, but what was the new additions. When Amazon came aboard, that year was $44 million. Based on discussions that I've been involved in, or at least party to, so forth, I'd really been hoping for a bigger number than $700,000. You know, I think there's enough in the pipeline that will pick it up, but I think that was one weak part in the information we got from the appraiser. And the other thing, a couple of things. Recommended millage rate at the moment, subject to what you want to do with it, is 9.65 mils. 5-year plan said 9.75. The FY21 is 9.8 mils. Each tenth of a mil is about a little over $100,000, just to keep in mind as you start to make the trade-offs on how you want all the pieces to come together in the budget. And one last thing I'll share with you very quickly, headcount increase from the original FY21 budget is 17.7. I will tell you 2 days ago it was 29.7. So this budget has not been put together without an awful lot of effort, and taking that head count out probably took about $600,000 out of the budget. So, please.
Mr. Manthan, if I may.
I'm sorry.
As far as the millage rate goes, I thought that was a very prudent decision to do in order to show effort to our residents that we're making change on this dais. I thought it was very important to lower the millage rate to a competitive level so our residents know we care about them and what they do for the great city Opa-locka, and then we want to keep them to stay here. Now, my initial recommendation was 9.5. Mr. Anthony said, wait a minute now, you're going a little bit too aggressive. Slow down, you need to knock it back up a little bit, you know? So, you know, I was trying to be aggressive, but I think this is a good start. And I think based on some of you all's expectations that have been on this day since day one, you all have emphasized lowering the millage rate for our residents, lowering the millage rate. And in my first year, I was not able to do that, and that was unfortunate. But I think what we see now is very important. And I think the growth that the city is having revenue-wise should be noted expeditiously. And instead of throwing additional expenses on top of expenses on top of expenses and saying we have extra money, I said, wait a minute. What about our residents? What about our residents? Why are we utilizing extra money? Even though we do need services and new things in the city, when do we get back to our residents? And I think this is the point to do so. So I think this is a great topic of conversation. If I may, Mr. Anthony, while you're on millage rate, I really would like to engage the commission to ask what their thoughts are in regards to the millage rate, because I think that's very beneficial in how everything's put together moving forward.
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Davis.
Thank you, and thank you to the manager, Mr. Anthony, for all the hard work that was involved in the lowering of our millage rate. As you know, we've had over the past several years the highest millage rate out of the 34 municipalities that call Miami-Dade county home. I was always troubled at this statistic, simply because not only did we have the highest millage rate, but also simultaneously our city also had the highest poverty level out of those 34 cities. So I'm just glad to see that, the time has come, although, it's not as gradual as we would like. 6 to 7, I think, is the sweet spot with most municipalities in Miami-Dade, but I'm definitely glad to see, such a gradual decline, which is actually less than what was proffered in the 5-year recovery plan. So again, kudos to Mr. Manager, Mr. Anathan, and all your hard work. I know sometimes I could be a bit bullheaded when it comes to certain issues, but we work through this together, and now our residents will benefit. So thanks again.
Anyone else? All right. I'll echo the statements of Commissioner Davis in trying to reduce the tax burden upon our residents and businesses. I just in particular would definitely like to make sure we have some audited financials and we're up to date with our finance, so we have a very accurate picture of our money before we start making major changes. So I'm glad to see it's a gradual change instead of a major change. And I look forward to seeing those actual numbers so that we're very clear about how much money we actually have and how we've been doing as stewards of taxpayers' dollars. So looking forward to that.
If I may, Bob, thank you so much for your hard work and dedication and working with me through this budget. It's been a very strenuous process. I think budget time is very strenuous for everybody, working around the clock and having meetings all times of days to kind of get through this. This gradual change is not taken lightly. Even though we don't have audited financials through current, we monitor our cash flow very carefully. We have data points from various different organizations, governmental entities. So please know, we know with a pretty good estimate what our cash position is, and knowing where we're at year to date with budget is just getting those systems updated for proper reporting. So know that the efforts that Mr. Anthony puts in along with Ms. Lazier in maintaining those records and really manually doing it, because that's what they're doing. They're manually doing this work. I think our projections are pretty accurate based on that manual hard work that they do. But I understand the mayor's sentiments. We do want to have up-to-date audit financials, and we're working towards that goal. But know that we are doing this budget, and we know our cash flow, and we're doing it very responsibly. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Vice Mayor Williams.
I do thank you, Mr. Manager, for the decrease. I do agree with Commissioner Davis and Mayor Pyatt. When we talk about a tax base, we're talking about millage rates and everything else that supports our city, we're talking about homeowners. And so that's why I believe it is extremely important. And I'm glad that we are increasing our home ownership in the city of Opa-locka, because we can have all these conversations and increase or decrease and make increases or decreases. But at the end of the day, this comes from homeowners, and we up here are homeowners, and everyone else that that we're talking about and we're fighting for when we talk about decreasing taxes. So I think that part is important, that we continue to fight for home ownership, our homeowners to decrease taxes and their millage rate, and just to make sure that we're, providing for our residents, that we actually are, doing something good for them. So thank you.
If I can add one point to it, getting back into the numbers, with this millage rate, which is about a 1.5% decline, and with the tax base growing about 6%, 6.6%, When it comes time to officially pass whatever millage rate you choose, if you choose this one, it will be announced as a 5% tax increase. So we're moving in the right direction, but it's still going to be labeled as a tax increase. I just want to give you a heads up, just so you don't say, well, the millage rate's down, so therefore everything's great. We're going the right direction, but with the tax base up and millage rate down, the up exceeds the down, and it will be, to follow the state statute, it will be announced as a tax increase. So just please keep that in mind.
Thank you for making that clarification. That's a very good point. We appreciate that.
Well, it's too easy.
Big deal.
I'll stop.
Go ahead, you're good. You can continue, but that was the,
No,
I'm
but
glad you pointed that out.
millage rate down is a good thing, but it's got to be put in the context of the bigger
Context,
picture.
exactly.
I just need to remind you.
Thank
And it does get announced as such as part of the passing of the millage rate. Very quickly, we're just going to look at headcount. Headcount growth, I mentioned before, was 17.7. You can see where the growth is. Building license has been a concern, being staffed up to make sure there are enough boots on the ground there to get the job done. Automation on top of it to get it to where it's supposed to be. Cover that more in 14 days. Parks and Recreation is decided they're going to have a swarm of part-time employees, and which is consistent with what a lot of cities do, because their hours they work and so forth really has got to be slated to when the people need to have their services. So you can see 15 part-time people for Parks and Recreation. Again, as I mentioned before, your police department now is totally different than what you had last August. And you can see it in terms of the staffing requests, both in sworn and non-sworn. And the last one where you see larger than even ordinary growth is in roads and streets, and that gets right back into beautification again. So that's where the recommendations are in terms of your staffing.
We're putting an additional 8 people in police.
Yes, sir. That's the recommendation.
From where? Recommendation from where?
The recommendation from staff.
That's a recommendation from the police department. It's a recommendation from the city manager's office that this occurs.
Yes, sir. It takes your sworn from, let me think about it, from 44 to 49. And it also builds up your administrative staff by 3 people. You'll see that in detail. And if that's something that's going to need further elaboration,
Yeah,
we'll certainly try to defend those numbers for you.
Yeah, if we can get a memo about that and how that corresponds with the Miami-Dade County's assessment of our staffing levels in the police department, and what will also justify such a large increase in police, while seeing that there's other finance, like finance, HR, public work. I see more people in public works too, but there are quite a few places that have had serious needs that impact, like say, property values, that impact the finances of our city. And I would definitely love to see and just understand. We don't have to do it now, but I would like to at least hear the logic behind why so much of an increase in police is better than finance, public works, and other things that can also increase our tax base. Thank you.
Mr. Anthony,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Anthony,
Excuse me.
Mr. Mayor, the key to creating a budget is looking at staffing requests from all departments. All departments have issued their appropriate staffing requests, and most of them have been fulfilled. Most of them. And if they have not been fulfilled, one staff member may have been taken away, if that, from the staffing recommendation. At the end of the day, we want a balanced budget. I look at the bottom line. My job is to look at all departments in the bottom line. If the bottom line shows a balanced budget and I can fulfill staffing requests from various departments that I've requested staffing requests from, then we fulfill them. We've met with each individual director and went over their staffing request. And we have fulfilled most of the staffing request. I look at the budget, how it balances out, And if the budget balances out right, and I look at what police department does, number one, your police department is your number one revenue generating agency of this city with the red light camera program, citations, and various other things that they do. The red light camera program is managed by the police department. It is a police department initiative. That revenue that comes in from red light camera, why not reinvest some of that revenue into the police department? And that red light program and the various other programs is carrying this city and other departments on a day-to-day basis. So I just want to be cognizant when we're talking about public safety, the safety of our residents, with our crime rate and what we're dealing with and the challenges we had a broken police department for several years, a broken police department. We have a new chief of police that has made staffing recommendations. I support his recommendations. I support him 125%, and we will provide a memo. But when we talk about public safety and cutting from public safety, a proposed budget, when public safety is held harmless by the state of Florida because of the state of our police department, as a city manager, I have to stand up for my departments. And I will stand up for any department. If anybody proposes any cuts for any department, I'm here to stand up for these departments. And it's the commissioner's will not to approve it, that's perfectly fine. But since police was specifically put on display tonight, I would say, Mr. Mayor, we will provide a memorandum. And I believe they need the resources that they've requested. And it increases revenue because some of those resources will deal with the parking issue in Alabama, the dedicated traffic unit, deal with all the traffic issues that we have in the city, and all the accidents that we have in the city. But we'll provide a detailed memo, Mr. Mayor. But public safety, that's sensitive. I think it's sensitive to our residents. And when we talk about proposed cuts potentially, it rubs me the wrong way. But I just want to make that clear. We'll provide the appropriate memos.
I look forward to that memo. And just to clarify for the record, no one said anything about cutting police. We just simply said the increase from 8 additional people as opposed to more than anywhere else. That's the specific thing. So, and also since you brought up the red light camera, we'd love to get a report on the debt that we owe to that. Because if we're allocating funds, using those funds to police instead of paying back that debt, that is definitely something we want to be clear upon, because that's one thing that a lot of our residents have an issue with is a red light camera. And the only reason why we did not remove it was because we had to pay back that debt. So if we can get an understanding of how those funds are being used, in the memo, that'll be very helpful.
We'll get a clear
Thank you.
understanding. Mr. Mayor, we'll give you a clear understanding of that, but I will tell you this. I will say this. The debt that the red light camera program that's in was before my time. We're working to address that debt. We've sent the appropriate letters. We're asking for the appropriate forgiveness. We have addressed it. The state of Florida is aware of it. Without this red light program, this city would not be able to sustain what we have right now, based on the revenues after we pay the bill. The revenues that we receive from the red light program, if we were to cut out the red light program, we will cut from a lot of these departments and we'll be doing a lot of layoffs. And understand the red light program is sensitive to the residents of Opa-locka, and I sincerely apologize for that. But a lot of cities have red light programs. There are programs that are in place to prevent accidents, to monitor traffic, and provide traffic citations for people that violate the law. That is the purpose of the red light program. Okay, and a lot of cities have it. So just to say we don't agree with and we're going to cut it out when we don't know what the ramifications of that's going to cause to our debt service, is going to cause to our employees that we have here currently, and what that adds to revenue, we have to just be careful saying get rid of that debt just on behalf of people who don't like getting red light cameras. Stop at the red light. Don't turn on red. Don't turn on red. Follow Follow the correct traffic laws as you were written when you got your driver's license, and you don't have to worry about the red light camera ticket.
Is it a side point? On we go? Okay, very quickly.
Mr. Anthony, you can make your side point. Your
Say again?
side point is always accurate. You can make a side point.
No, I was just going to say, it's my understanding that many of the people, first off, you got a lot of people crashing red lights, as you all know. And a lot of those people are not residents of the city. So,
Only 3% of people that get red light cameras are residents of Opa-locka.
so anyhow, that's anecdotal because I don't have that in front of me, but that's what I've understood. Okay, we have addressed a lot of this already. I'm just going to hit the highlights on it. See, the general fund, I had mentioned before that suddenly we're generating a lot of money. My expectation is that we're going to have somewhere of excess of $6 to $7 million in FY20 of funding versus what we actually expended. Again, the expenditures are probably at FY19 levels when the revenue was at a much lower level. Not surprisingly, within the general fund, your single biggest expense item is going to be your personnel cost. You can see that right there in that number with the proposed headcount that we've been talking about so far. I mentioned grants. You can see the 3.7 there. That's, you're looking at your CARES Act. No news there. You can see fund balance. If I'm anywhere near accurate, it's going to go to 7.2 to 9.4. At this point, we're proposing the use of 1.6 for one-time activities. Please. This is just give you an idea of where you're spending by department. I've highlighted the bigger areas. You can see the growth in, again, this is general fund expenditure over the original budget. Amongst other things, the city manager is proposing to bring in a shift in personnel from city clerk to his office, which constitutes part of that. Also, in addition to that, we have the 2 part-time people that are going to be proposed as part of the staffing plan. Within non-department, the primary growth is things such as the $50,000 for your internal audit. I'm sorry, for your strategic plan. We've got another $25,000 in there. Again, responding to the operational audit. Recommendation to bring in an outside accounting firm to begin the process of doing internal audits to make sure that whatever we get out of the operational audit, in fact, stays in place. Human resources actually have some staffing increase in there, plus some other programs. Building license, as I said, is a program that's been of concern. So pros increase there. Parks and maintenance, you can see the growth there. And again, the police number over the original FY21 budget is $1.2 million. Building maintenance includes $60,000 for actually painting some of the buildings, which is related to the beautification program. Streets is up, again, related to the beautification program.
We can move on, but just really quickly,
Yes, sir.
I cannot believe that we're talking about with HB1, with the decrease in police budget, that we're literally increasing the police budget about 4 times any other department in this city. And that is not one of our major challenges that is facing our city. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Hear you, Mr. Manager, but $1 million increase, yeah, that's something that we could talk about further. But that is,
Mr. Mayor, violent crime is
quite a
one of the
bit.
major challenges, just not stated out loud. Violent crime and homicides within the city of Opa-locka is a major challenge. Proper
Even though
police
they've
service for our
decreased.
residents.
Even though violent crime and crime is at its lowest in the city for I don't know how many years.
Lowest.
Like it's been decreasing. It's been decreasing.
So yeah, it's been decreasing because the personnel increases slowly, incrementally. Personnel increases. Now we have traffic issues. There's other priorities that we have to look at in law enforcement. I understand that some may have an opinion of law enforcement that maybe law enforcement may not need additional funding and may actually maybe law enforcement should be defunded. I understand that. Okay. When these residents call me, they call me about public safety. They call me about issues with traffic. They call me about Alabama. We have officers responding to call. Our calls have not went down increasing. We still have a lot of officers responding to calls and various other things that we look at. So, Mr. Mayor, I understand. But in most municipalities, the police department has the highest budget and has the highest increases based on crime. And we can look at other cities that believe in funding their police departments. And the Miami-Dade report actually asked us to increase staffing. Part of that was increased supervision. That's part of the Miami-Dade report. Increase officers, increase supervision, increase staffing. That's part of the Miami-Dade report. We may have not done it in the manner they wanted us to do it, but we did it. So when we talk about reform and change, we have to look at all areas and understand, just to make a separation, we're talking about general fund expenditures. Our water crisis, our flooding crisis, that comes out of water sewer fund, Mr. Mayor. That comes out of water sewer. When you talk about the 4 major challenges, some of these other challenges come out of other funds. So I just want to make it clear, when we're talking about $1.something million for the police department, this is the general fund we're talking about. When we get to the water sewer fund, that's where the fund comes in at tonight's briefing. But that's where your water challenges come in at. Water billing, meters, and all that stuff comes out of that fund. So that's separated out. When we have 4 major challenges, that separate where the funds come out for the challenges, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And if I could make one additional point on the size of the increase, if you look at the original 21 budget, you can see, as you well know, police is probably 5 times bigger than the next biggest department. And the next biggest department is finance, and finance assumed in the FY21 budget, not only a full staff of 8, which it should have, but additional consulting services. So even there, you had a fair amount of one-time charges in there. So yeah, the police increase is a lot bigger than anybody else, but it started as a much bigger number even before we looked at the increases.
Excuse me, Mr. Anthony.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
No,
Quick
ma'am,
question.
please. That's the purpose of the meeting.
Will you outline what those increases and decreases are for eventually in the presentation? I
Yes,
see-
ma'am. It'll be in the budget book
Okay,
in excruciating detail.
because I'm looking at commission and I'm not sure what that meant. But that
Well,
he'll
commission
get to
came
that.
down is primarily a function of health costs. Let me, Nelson, go back, please. Yeah, it's down because some commissioners who are no longer on the board had high health costs. Some of the new commissioners had no health cost. That's where you see the savings.
Okay, so that's the decreases of savings.
Oh,
Is
yes,
that-
ma'am. I'm sorry.
Okay,
If it's not clear over there, it says
Yeah.
increase or decrease, over or under. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. Nelson, next page, please. When you look at the general fund, it's compensation, it's operating expense, and it's capital. Now, capital is not a problem because if the fund balance is rich as I think it is, we can spend on that with no problems and still maintain our threshold. The one thing that we haven't looked at any detail is the $3.7 million or $3.684 million that's in the proposed budget at this point. It's a busy chart, but I just want to point out an awful lot of this expense is baked into operating the city. I mean, when you look at the first 3 categories there, $645,000 for legal. Nobody knows what the correct legal number is, but we use a number as a starter and hope that, there aren't too many litigations. But it's not a number that you manage that well, so you can't say, okay, let's take 100,000 out of it, because it is whatever the events are going to be. Next number, 375, next large one, utilities. We now have a pretty good track record. That's going to happen. You can't manage that down unless you suddenly turn off the AC and turn out all the lights. Next one, gas and oil. A little bit of a guess. It's based on what prices might be, but it's tough to manage. The point of this chart is to say that within that $3,684,000, there's an awful lot baked into it. I mean, it's a very tempting number in total. 3.6, my God, we should be able to get $400,000 out of it. Not without giving up a lot of stuff that we do just as a matter of course today. So this is just to give you some sense of the various things that the general fund is going to spend money on in terms of operating expense. I'm not going to drag you through it at this point unless there's anything that catches anybody's attention. But these are the types of things that are buried in that 3.6 million. Is there anything that catches anybody's eye that they want to ask further questions on? Okay. Okay. Wilson, please. I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Anderson,
I did her voice. Yes, yes, sir.
I have a question as it relates to the expense, the line item for 11,200 for employee recognition. Can you explain, I guess, what
Yes,
that
sir.
includes?
That's obviously it's an HR program, and the HR director has felt that we have really under-recognized our employees. She's thinking of things like service awards, other events that just allow the employees to understand, hey, you are appreciated and so forth. That's the underpinnings of that number.
Okay, so that's a HR expenditure.
Yes, sir.
What about miscellaneous? So there's a
Miscellaneous
large amount. Could you-
Miscellaneous is all the dogs and cats of about 18 divisions, you know, some lien release, anything that didn't meet the $10,000 threshold and couldn't be grouped together. But it really represents the dogs and cats of 15 to 18 different divisions. You unfortunately will be dragged through it in 2 weeks. You'll get to see each one of those. But that's the basis of it.
Okay, and where it says the strategic plan facilitator, that's the proposal that you spoke of.
Yes, sir.
in
That's
this
what I alluded to
upcoming
before.
budget?
It's in response to an operational audit item. And the recommendation is to really bring in somebody who's skilled in taking a city through the process to an end product.
Okay, and since we kind of still on the topic, in any way, are we looking at our budget to develop outcomes and then tie those outcomes to departmental goals that could ultimately be reflected in whatever strategic plan or anything that we're putting forth?
Sorry, I missed part of that. Would you say it again, please?
So in the budget, so are we looking at the budget outcomes and tying that to, I guess, on a departmental level, achievable goals? And then also tie that into the strategic plan or vision or whatever comprehensive planning process that we're doing as an agency.
Well, I don't think you have a current strategic plan. I think the last one was done in 2014. So it really doesn't give it any budgets, as you will see where you have a current strategic plan. They will show you what each activity, how it relates to a strategic plan. At the moment, I don't think we have a really current one to do with it. What we owe you and what you'll get in 2 weeks is a statement of what each division, what each department objectives are for the year and how they choose to measure themselves to demonstrate whether they got there or not. So I think that's half an answer to your question.
Okay, and the reason why I brought that up is because, Mr. Manager, I guess it's a question to you. There should be some sort of synergy in what resources we're putting in the budget versus what outcomes, we want to see based on those resources that we're putting forth, and then also looking at the goals of each department and ensuring that's in line, as well as those items are in line with the strategic vision. I know at one point, we talked about having a comprehensive planning session and that sort of thing. And of course, since then, we have 2 new colleagues that have come on, and I guess that conversation went to the wayside. Is that something that we're envisioning in this year's budget to as a body, as a new commission, come up with those strategic benchmarks for the next 5, 6, 7, whatever? Okay.
Yeah, so first, what the goal is, and actually this will happen in the next 60 days, I have human resources planning this, is a retreat that will occur that will include department heads and the commission. And the retreat will have breakout sessions with a facilitator. And then we will have one generalized session In that generalized session, the directors and the commission will get an overview of what each department actually does for the city, what their duties and responsibilities are, and hear what your expectations are of each department. Very much boldly in the raw up front, what your expectations are from each department with a facilitator. So for a day, you guys can get involved in the day-to-day. You guys can say, this is what I think you all should do as department heads. This is what I think you all should do as a department. This is what my expectation is. And I sit there and listen, and I speak, and the facilitator speaks, and we're able to put that out there. And the department heads are able to take that back and develop their plan based on kind of hearing you guys in this session. Because here at the dais, it's a little bit different environment. In a central location where you have a facilitator that's facilitating the conversation, because even I get a little hot-headed sometimes. So when we have a facilitator that can facilitate that conversation between the department heads, the commission, and then have a separate breakout groups, I think will be beneficial and will address what you're talking about, Commissioner Davis, in detail. For this budget, we have goals, objectives, and we have measures. And those measures are based on the success of various initiatives that each department has. So each, like Mr. Austin has beautification, he has CIP, he has public works. There's certain things that you guys have noted out that you have issues with certain departments and certain things you guys want done. So the department heads went back and visualized that, and we included that in that kind of thought process. And some of these budgetary changes is based on input that you guys bring to us, and it's based on resident input, what I hear. It's not just arbitrary numbers that are put together and we just put them together. I wanted to give the police department way more staff that they requested, I feel they need, but that was impossible. So we had a scaled back number based on the priorities that we see as a city. And, I think that's very important, but we will be having this session in the next 90 days. And I look forward to the commission participating and having that session with the directors where we're able to come together as one and really have that upfront conversation, because I think it's needed, especially with a new commission.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I just wanted to ensure that we haven't left that conversation and that it's still ongoing as far as, putting something in place. So I look forward to you putting that together and us as a board, along with staff, really hashing out what we kind of want to see collectively as a city. So thank you.
All right, Mr. Anthony, you're on slide
We went-
9 out of 23.
We went one step too far. We're now backward. Nope. Nelson, that's good. Thank you. Now, very quickly, this is what we're talking about, capital within the general fund. This is not CIP. I will tell you, Parks and Recreation had a list of about $600,000. Just in terms of management, we're putting a $200,000 number in there, and you'll see some details behind it in 2 weeks from now. IT folks talk about $40,000, and then you have a collection of items down there addressing various needs that are perceived by the city, or I'm sorry, perceived by the staff. So in total, $500,000. That pretty much completes the general fund. We're about to move on unless there's any further questions on the general fund. Okay, on we go. Okay, here is the cloud on the horizon. The revenue that we're generating is not covering our costs, and it becomes particularly obvious when we look at FY22. The fund balance has been deteriorating. At the moment, FY20 says it gets better. I'm not sure how good those numbers are, but at the moment it says it gets better. Even with it getting better, by the time we get to FY22, it's negative. As I said before, the revenue is not sufficient. Primary villain in this thing is our debt service, both to the county and to the state. I can see a little more detail. But when you have debt service that's 23.5% of your revenue, it doesn't give you much room to cover much other expenses. Right now in the budget, I've got 6% of revenue in for legal expense. And again, when you add the two of those together, you're talking about 30% right there. When you start to do that, you know nothing's getting to the bottom line to cover capital. Are requesting 2 additional staff people within the water sewer finance to really go after the delinquencies out there on the old accounts. So, thank you. Okay, highlights on this. The fund balance, it's called working capital in the enterprise fund, but just for consistency, we're calling it fund balance. In FY20, right now, it actually says it's going to get better. We're starting from what we believe to be a negative position. It's going to, if you accept those numbers, and I don't accept all of them, but if you do accept them, you can see that you're going to use fund balance 1.2 up here, and then 2.2 down over here in the proposed budget, gets you to a negative fund balance. So that's just a reiteration in numbers of what we covered a moment ago. You can see your legal expenses buried up here and also down in contingency. Your debt service, we owe, based on work that we've done and prior agreements with the state, we're going to owe around $800,000. The county is talking, I'm going to back up for a second. For last year or so, we've paid 1.2 to the county each year to pay down the debt service they see. There's a second round of debt associated with meter installation and so forth. At the moment, they have indicated that they want us to start paying that back as of January of the coming year, FY22. When you add that to the 1.2, in fact, you get yourself to 1.6. So between the two of these items, you're talking about 24% of your revenue on these 2 line items. So that's a problem. It causes you to use 2.2 of your fund balance and puts you into an unsustainable position. So that's our problem for the moment. Come back for a second, please. We have had discussions with the county about their debt service requirements for a couple months now. They are kind of in abeyance at the moment. I have made the recommendation to the city manager. I think we ought to go back to the county at this point and say we'd like to convert to interest-only payments for the next year or two till we get the legal issues behind us and have a little more flexibility in terms of our finance. Again, this is my recommendation, no more than that, but we have to do something. The other thing is you transfer out primarily to the general fund, to the risk management and so forth, 1.2 million. One thing you can do is with commission direction to not transfer that money out. What it says is it would impact the general fund, and to the extent it impacted the risk management fund, it means the other funds will have to pick up the portion that's not recovered from the water sewer fund. So that is an option. But the point is you have very little operating expense that you can get your hands around to really make a significant difference. Thank you.
Mr. Anthony,
Sir.
so I know we're going to issue the budget books on the 21st, but the commission needs to provide some type of direction in regards to how we deal with the water sewer fund before that budget book goes out. Do we want to borrow 1.2 from the general fund? Do we want to go back to the county and request to negotiate the debt service down to a certain level, until, we're done with our legal troubles that are draining money from the water sewer fund? What do we want to do, commission? What do we want to do? That fund is in trouble, and we have to do something, and it has to be something that's exact. I can't guarantee that the county would make an agreement by the time our budget is released, that they're going to agree to doing interest-only payments or agreeing not to necessarily put on board the additional debt January 1, because that requires potential commission approval to renegotiate. It requires the county commission's approval. And that's all commissioners within the county has to vote on that. All commissioners within the county has to vote on that. So do we want to remove the cost that the water sewer fund puts on the general fund and have the general fund assume other costs, that means we had to do other general fund cuts, correct?
It will, something needs to be done. We have to look at it in terms of one-time versus ongoing. We might just be able to absorb it through fund balance. We'll go back and look at it. I'm not sure what the trade-offs, but there will be an impact certainly.
You know, and then as far as loans from fund to fund, from the water sewer fund to the general fund and back and forth, I know at one time it was frowned upon, you know, by the state to loan money from one fund to another fund. We had the same issue with the CRA, where the general fund loaned the CRA money and that ended up becoming a finding. So what do we want to do? Because at the end of the day, you all have to approve the budget. I provide options. This is not one to say, Mr. Manager, you make the decision. This is not one of those items that you guys can say, Mr. Manager made the decision. It has to be some type of discussion, at least a consensus, so I know what direction to go. Mr. Mayor, I leave the floor to you and the commission.
To my colleagues, any comments?
I mean,
To frame this, when we talk about these four major challenges, they come to a head literally right here on this page in this budget. Because as Mr. Anathan noted, the debt, because of the financial crisis, is put, this page right here, thank you, has an impact. Our ability to pay for the needed infrastructure repairs come out of this to address our flooding and our capital improvement and projects. And then number two, out of finance, number one, second is the water billing. And that is the gathering of the revenues we need to fund this water sewer fund. So that's been my biggest concern. Sitting here on this dais is these numbers, and it shows. What I am curious about is that on the prior page, it says we want to recommend 2 additional people to focus on delinquent accounts receivable. How much do we have outstanding in those accounts receivable at the moment?
Finance director is here to back me up. I think we have something at least at the end of FY19 about $3.5 million. If they collect $90,000, they paid for themselves.
I thought it was significantly higher than that. Can we get clarity on that?
It's
Madam
a fair amount has
Finance
been
Director?
reserved. That's the net accounts receivable.
The last number I remember hearing was almost 6 million.
Yes, sir, but I think in the audit, they certainly reserved an additional amount of that. I mean, your AR is composed of 2 pieces, total delinquency and how much you've reserved as bad debt, as I'm sure you know. And they've increased it to the point that I think the net is somewhere around 3.5 million now. But again, there is, in terms of what might be collectible, it's now deemed not to be collectible because of the size of the reserve you created. It is a bigger number. And again, these 2 people, if they can collect $90,000 out of a much bigger number, they pay for themselves.
So I would just let's double check those numbers, and if you can provide a report to give an accurate number to the
Sure, the
commission,
finance department can.
that would be helpful. But the key thing is that we know that we have literally millions of dollars outstanding. And the longer we take to hire the people to secure that funding, the harder it's going to be to do so. Yet we're not budgeting for the people to do the work to collect those revenues. And that's the balancing act that I'm expressing when it comes to such a significant increase that I'm seeing in other departments. Is that here we are with an area that can literally bring in millions of dollars into the city, or hundreds of thousands at the very least. And we're not allocating the proper staffing levels to be able to secure those funds so that we can pay back our debts which would give us more revenue to invest in our capital improvement projects, which would give us an opportunity to solve majority of the flooding and across the city and help us to build up our business districts and industrial districts to bring about the revenues to continue to develop the city. So all this comes to a head right here. And I think it's important for us to be clear about what that looks like and whether or not we're going to invest in securing the people to and the policies to be able to recoup some of those funds.
Mr. Mayor, may I? Before Mr. Lazier speaks on this subject, we have a couple barriers that we have with collections. The first barrier is you have a class action lawsuit and a motion that was filed to stop the city from filing liens. So we cannot file liens on delinquent accounts right now because of a judge's order preventing us to file liens. So we can't do that. So if there's no lien, there's no court action. So we can't take anybody to court. There's a lot of apartment complexes in Opa-locka that owe us quite a bit of money. And every time we send a collection notice, they get a certain attorney to file an action against them to stop the city from collecting. This all will come to a head when this water billing fiasco is over. When this water billing fiasco is over, there's a final court order, there's a final resolution. We're allowed to put liens on properties. We can collect. I can hire 100 collection people. I cannot even sell these accounts to a collection firm because we can't file liens. They can't file liens. They can't do court actions because all these dollar amounts are being disputed. Everybody that owes money to the city, old water bill, new water bill, is disputing the old system. Now they're disputing the system. I have court actions that are filed with Miami-Dade water billing, and they're filing actions on the city, stopping us from collecting debts. I see the court actions come in every day as well as the city attorney's office. So every time we try to go to these $300,000 bills, these $500,000 bills that these apartment complex owners owe us because they're taking the money out their person's rent, it's a part of their rent is utilities. They're taking it out the rent, but they're not even paying the city. How about they're not paying the city nothing? They stopped paying the city, period. So their debt is collecting. We're in a pandemic. We can't do shutoffs. Part of collecting is shutting off water. I can't shut off water. And honestly, if I shut off water right now, you all would hang me out to dry. If I start cutting off these residents' water accounts out here, especially with the skepticism and debate with this current water system situation. So, Mr. Mayor, you're asking about collectability. I can give you a number: $6 million, $500 million. We're going to give you a dollar amount right now, but these are our challenges, Mr. Mayor. These are our challenges. So you can say how we go after people. We can make phone calls and say, hey, John Doe, we want you to pay this water bill. They're going to say, well, you can't do anything to us, and we're part of the class action lawsuit. And our attorney said that you can't file a lien against us and not to pay you anything. So no bills are getting paid. As soon as this water billing stuff is resolved, attorney's fees and various different things that you see up there and various other items that we're paying, then this will be resolved. But until we have this water billing litigation, nobody's paying the city. Nobody's paying us for water. And there's court actions, the courts, our Miami-Dade courts, that are stopping us from collecting because we cannot file liens. Liens cause payments. When you don't have liens, they can't pay. Now you're going to run a situation where owners are going to start selling properties, selling these apartment buildings, and we didn't collect and not file a lien. And then once they sell, we can't collect it at all. So these are the challenges we have. So Miss Lazier can speak on the subject, but as far as collectability, we'll try as far as the individual accounts and our loyal residents that do pay, but we have big bills from these big owners of these big apartment complexes that are not paying us nothing at all. And they're taking it out the people's rent.
Mr. Manager, quick question, Mr. Mayor. Quick question. So will the two additional employees come on board after all these obstacles
No,
that you
so
just
we're looking at the
mentioned?
two, so we're
Because
looking at the
how-
two employees that come on and collect small accounts, like small debts, 2,000 here, 5,000 there, residents that haven't made payments on old water bills, people that are loyal to the city that are willing to pay. Because what's happening is when we request somebody to pay a bill, they ask for us to reconcile those accounts. Because they say we don't trust, we don't trust the data that you have. So I need two additional personnel for those people that want to pay, that we can do the research, reconcile the accounts, get them to come in and sit down, because that's how touchy-feely we are right now. We want you to come in and sit down and look at the calculations and how we calculate it, so you can trust the billing is correct. And those people that dispute their bills being high, do you know how many water meters this city has replaced multiple times for residents that say my water bill is not accurate? And so we tell Miami-Dade County, go out and change the water meter to double check, change it again to triple check to make sure the reading is correct. So we have to do all those things and require staff. We could try to sell the accounts. Another option is to sell the accounts to a collection agency, but a collection agency is not going to take the debt, in my opinion, because it's so disputed. So until this water billing case is resolved, then I would advise the commission that we should have a collection agency come in to assist and collect the debt. Have them buy the debt. You have collection agencies that will buy the debt from the city at a certain percentage. The city gets the money immediately, and the debt accounts are gone. And they're not the city's problem. But I can't even do that because we can't even validate the accounts because everybody's disputing everything. And because there's a lawsuit, nobody trusts the numbers and nobody's paying. And I can't do shutoffs right now because of the moratorium. And then even when shutoffs are allowed, I got to come back to the commission and ask you all, do you want me to start shutting off water accounts for delinquent people? And then you all are going to say, well, Mr. Manager, this is one of the major challenges and we don't want to affect our residents and, it's going to cause issues. So we're not going to be able to do shutoffs. So that we have to look at that.
For the sake of time, could we schedule a executive session to discuss this water billing and these collections so that we get more clarity on this and get an update on this legal that's causing 6% of our revenues to be addressing this. So we can do that. That'll be helpful before this next budget meeting. Is that something we can do, Madam Attorney?
You're talking about an additional executive session regarding the class action?
There's one coming up already.
We had one.
We had one already.
When is it? We already had one when?
Last month.
Oh, that's one I missed. So were y'all aware about the amount in terms of the collections and the challenges and frustrations? Were we getting briefed on those things? That's really the crux of this conversation, is that we're literally spending so much money on legal services. And one of the challenges that the manager is saying is they don't want to move on collections until that's resolved, which can take quite a while, which if it takes quite a while, that affects this budget here, year by year. So
Mr. Mayor, what's
if
your
everyone's been
recommendation?
addressed, I'm cool with it. But if that's what I want to make sure, if y'all been.
Mr. Mayor, I guess I hear what you're saying. I just want to hear your recommendation.
Mhm.
I know the issues, but what is your recommendation to the issues?
So I think that, number one, these two additional staff should be a part of this budget now, and that we should also work with our attorneys to secure clear policies and procedures that we can follow in the evaluation of the current accounts in alignment with our attorneys, and also have the staffing that can do the research on that. At the very least, to address some of these collection issues.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
at the end of the meeting, I don't have a problem giving you a recap with Ms. Cobb. We can kind of give you a recap on dollar amounts personally.
Speaking to the mic.
We can give you a recap on dollar amounts as far as projected legal costs. Me and Ms. Cobb can discuss that with you. It was discussed with the commission. And that's one concern. If you want to talk about these other issues, it's up to you and the commission if you want to have another shade meeting to talk to attorney about the other issues. But projected legal costs was provided at the shade meeting.
And that should also, since that was a part of the executive session, that needs to be just shared with the commission.
My colleague said that it's not necessary for another executive session, so I go with the will of the commission on that. But the key thing is doing something about this water billing crisis that we're doing and hiring those people, going through the process, working with our legals to recoup as much as possible as soon as possible. So that's really the essence of this particular sliding situation.
But
But I
Mr.
know
Mayor,
if we can have another meeting, that's great, because literally we're on side 12 and he got
Mr.
23
Mayor,
more to
this
go.
is important.
I mean, not 23, 11 more to go.
Mr. Mayor, so if we're gonna stay until long for one meeting, I think this is one meeting that needs to be done because you all have to make decisions that's gonna be input into the budget book, and ultimately a budget you have to approve. If I don't have answers and I make certain arbitrary decisions, you're gonna say, Mr. Manager, you didn't get our input before you made the decision. It adds to the budget book. It's in the budget book and you all have to vote on it. Okay, the only issue is the water sewer fund. That's the only complicated issue. Once we make a determination of what direction you want us to go on that, we can get through the rest of these sides quite quickly. The question is, do you want to not withhold the overhead cost that the water sewer fund burdens the city and the city covers it? Do you want the general fund to loan? What's the dollar amount, Mr. Anderson?
I don't think a loan is really going to help.
I understand
It's
that,
gotta
but
be
you brought it,
protection.
you brought it up as an option, so.
I did, but I thought again, I don't think that's going to buy us anything. Loans are meant to be probably no more than 2 years. This is a bigger problem. Water sewer fund's not going to be in a position to pay it back in 2 years.
So what is your suggestion that we do?
My
sir?
suggestion is the only thing we control is the amount of money that's transferred out to the other funds. And I think we ought to take that out of the budget. And, you know, the other funds will have
And
to
then the
do
general
support.
fund take the hit for it.
The general fund and also some of the other funds, yeah. I think that certainly we need to move ahead with the county, but I don't think you can build into the budget something that's going to be debated and redebated and may or may not happen. So I wouldn't want to bet on it. So I think we have to plan for the worst. Yes, move forward with the county, try to get them to interest only. But in the meantime, the only thing we directly control is that transfer out. And with the commission's indulgence, we'll take it out and at least it will go part way to staunch the bleeding.
And 1 million, and mind you, if we do that, and I'm perfectly fine with it, that's $1.5 million of cuts from the general fund. So that removes, that
And
will
some of
affect
that to a lesser extent, some of the other funds,
yeah, and other funds.
stormwater, and so
Yeah.
forth.
Yeah, so that's gonna be a general cut that may affect services, may affect personnel count and various other things. So that's the hard decision. So that's why I say when we talk about police and other departments, the department that is in trouble is water sewer, is not the general fund. So if that is the commission's will, then we will be back at the drawing board, sir, doing $1.5 million worth of cuts, and we're gonna figure out where we're gonna get that money from. If that's Mr. Anthony's recommendation, the commission concurs with it. That's my budget director, my right hand, and I agree exactly what he says. If he advises me of that, and that's the direction, that's why I recommend to the commission.
Mr. Manager, Mr. Anthony, well, I guess either one.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm trying to get this straight because this whole conversation is just going
That's
a lot of
correct.
different places and I'm getting a little lost here in translation. Are you saying that we will pay the county through the general fund to offset what we're not able to collect from those that have not paid? Is that what we're saying?
You kind of cut to the bottom line. What you're saying is the water sewer fund's going to continue to pay the county, but we have relieved the responsibility to also pay back to the general fund. So you kind of cut to the chase on the thing. De facto, the general fund.
Yes,
is
we'll be paying
subsidizing.
for it. General fund will be
Yeah.
paying for it.
I mean, but
Okay, so-
it'll actually be paid through the water sewer fund. The point was that instead of having a $2.2 million loss, you'll have whatever half of that is, $1.0 million loss, which is not good, but certainly better than what you're looking at right now.
So I guess what I'm trying to do is weigh my options, and I'm not hearing options. I
No,
hear
you heard
general fund,
one
and I
option
hear
that
the
the-
loan, and we know the loan is not gonna, I can tell you, none of us are gonna agree to that. So is that the,
Mr. Anthony has provided the best recommendation to me, which I'm providing to the commission. That is the budget person. He's gonna tell me what's the best bet, what's gonna get us to the bottom line. The bottom line is the general fund will assume $1.5 million of debt from the water sewer fund. I have to make cuts in general fund, more cuts than what you guys see tonight. And I'll be we were dealing with this until this weekend, probably, trying to figure that out. So that's where we're at. That's the recommendation. So that's the recommendation I'm providing the commission to allow $1.5 million be withheld from the water sewer fund instead of the general fund paying the water sewer fund $1.5 million that it owes. We're gonna hold off on that. We're gonna keep it, and then we're just gonna pay, and then the water sewer fund will be fine. It just won't owe the general fund.
If I may, there's one more aspect that I'm sorry.
Want to finish this aspect? Or you wanna-
Maybe,
Let Commissioner Taylor jump in.
okay, I'm with Vice Mayor, and I think all of us are confused because you told us you was gonna give us options. But the only thing that we're hearing is the 1.5 from the general fund to fund the water sewer, correct? And then I heard that we're gonna go to the county to see if we can rectify or fix that.
Mr. Anthony basically cut to the chase. I was providing you guys the options.
So there are no options.
It's
You're
a
just
short
recommending
list.
that-
It's a
okay,
short list,
So then
yes,
let's
sir.
take out the word option. There are no options. You're just recommending that's what we do.
I'm recommending that's because the only thing
Okay.
we control is certainty.
Because you guys keep throwing that word options, 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 but we're only hearing one option.
Well,
So
there
we
are
don't
two,
know
but
what we choose.
one we can't bet on. We certainly are going to go back and deal again with the county, but we don't know what the outcome of that's going to be.
So your recommendation right now is to do the 1.5
The
million.
only thing we control. Yes, sir.
Okay,
And
so
what,
that is our only option.
say again, please?
That's the only option.
That's the only one I can think of.
All right, so just to be clear, we're going to, these with raises that we've seen, increases that we've seen in previous slides need to be cut. That's what you're saying, number one, right?
Yes, sir. I think that's where we're at. I've
Okay.
got to take another look at it. Maybe we can somehow justify it as one time.
All right.
I'm
So
not
the
sure
other
we go
thing,
there.
are we going, because I think this is very important, are we going to invest in hiring the people that can help to collect? Are those people in this budget currently?
You have one in there right now, or I'm sorry, maybe two, and the recommendation is two more.
So the recommendation is for two more, and
Yes,
they're
sir.
not currently in this budget.
Correct.
So, and my colleagues are like, can we provide guidance to, number one, make those cuts to the general fund, as Mr. Anderson recommended, and also add those two additional people so that we can try and secure those revenues.
Mr. Mayor,
It's a bigger issue.
Commissioner Taylor.
I hear the two additional staff, but my concern is the if factor. You kept saying if they collect 90,000, then they'll pay their salary.
Yes,
But
sir.
who's to say that they collect that 90,000? We're still in the pandemic. So it's the if factor that bothers
Yep.
me when it comes down to the
There
two
are no
additional staff.
givens. You've got a very big target out there.
Because
It's several $1 million. So you've got a large target to run after.
But if we haven't gotten it by now, what makes you think we're gonna?
Well, there has been some
You
collections.
keep calling and telling me to pay. That doesn't.
Well, there have been collections. I don't have privilege, I have not access to that data, but they have collected.
No, there has been collections. There's just not significant. There haven't been like blockbuster numbers, maybe 100,000, maybe
Yeah,
that we've collected in a year.
because we didn't have the staff to make those calls. That's the thing. If there's additional staff are
Mr.
there, because there's so much money out, if the additional staff are there, we're more likely to, at the very least, cover the cost of the staff.
No, I don't agree with them, Mr.
and
Mayor. I just
give more.
it was the if factor that he kept bringing up that
So-
bothered, puzzled, and that didn't sit well with me.
I'm going to say this. We could bring on the 2 staff. The level of debt that we're in and the level of some of these accounts, they're at lean level. They're at lean levels now because of the pandemic, because of all these circumstances. People in our city, unless they're big apartment building owners, if I call them to pay a $5,000 bill, they're not going to be able to pay me a $5,000 bill. Some residents through hearsay have been told not to pay the water bills in Opa-locka. It's not reliable. Because of that hearsay and the lack of dispel, we have valid water accounts out there that are significant levels of collection. So yes, the 2 people may pay for their salaries, but how much more are they going to collect? If I can't place liens on properties and I can't leverage anything to get the collection. So that is something to think about. If you guys say remove the 2, I'm fine with that. I am perfectly fine with that. We added 2 because we needed collection efforts. Is it going to be her lurking collection efforts? I don't think so. I don't think we're going to bring 500,000 in with 2 people. Not until this water billing litigation is resolved. So if you guys say take away the 2, take away. If we want to keep the 2, we'll keep the 2. It's fine, but yeah, they may pay for themselves, but what else are they going to pay for?
If I could add one other dimension to that, which I was remiss not to bring up at the beginning, American Rescue Act. We have every reason to believe we have $6.8 million coming to us. We have not tried to fold that into the budget because we don't quite know the timing. We don't know the terms and conditions and so forth. So it's not there now. But to the extent that a major portion of it is going to go towards infrastructure, in my opinion, a large portion of it is going to go into the water sewer fund just because of the problems we're talking about now. So it doesn't mean that all infrastructure investment stops, but it just means it's going to be funded with other people's money.
One-time expense. It's going to be a one-time
Oh, yeah,
expense, and then the
clearly.
water sewer fund is still be in trouble.
Oh, clearly, but at least you're going to be able to move forward with your infrastructure using somebody else's money. So that's the good news.
All right, Mr. Manager, do you need any more clarity on the commission's position for this particular slide?
No, I make the final decisions. I'll make the final decisions, and they'll be in the budget book, and then we'll go from there.
Okay,
Next slide, please.
all right, thank you.
Very quickly, this is what's involved in CIP for next year for Water Sewer Fund. Only 2 projects. You can see the $600,000 related to Carroll Lane down here. That's being funded by state loans up here. There is a project hanging fire in terms of service lines in Miami Gardens. Would dearly love to do that because they want to refinish their roads, trying to do that beforehand, but it's not clear that we can afford to do it at this point. So just a statement on CIP.
So you're saying that we only need $600,000 to complete Carroll Lane over the next year?
Water sewer, you've got 800,000 in roads. You've got another 2.6 in stormwater, total 4 million at this point. You're only seeing the water portion of it right now.
Okay.
We believe it to be a $4 million project. Excuse me. Next slide, please. Quick view on stormwater. Whoops, went away. Can I get stormwater back, please? Next one, please. Thank you. Very quick message on this. It's in good shape, has very strong fund balance at this point. We're going to use it over the next 2 years, getting the charges onto the property tax bill is going to bring in another $900,000 a year. And we'll take a look at that in terms of numbers. Next slide, please. Okay, key points on this. Fund balance, very strong on the high side at 2.2. Have every reason to believe it's going to go up to 2.7 by the end of FY20. So we'll open at 2.7. We are using a fair amount of fund balance over the next 2 years. You can see 1.4 here, 900,000 there. Again, fund balance is nothing more than using your bank account, and it's going to be used to fund these projects here. But what it's going to do is it's going to provide you surplus revenue that, go to the next page, please. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Okay, too far. Please come back one. There you go. So what you see when we look at FY22, how are we going to fund $2.8 million? You've got 900 million, 900, what I'm calling available revenue. Available revenue is revenue that's available for CIP investment after you've covered all your other costs. So what you see is you do have $900,000 to start to put into your capital program each year. Now you've got a set of stormwater requirements that's far bigger than $1 million a year. So once we can get back into dealing with somebody like the state revolving loan fund, where we can actually do some financing, this surplus cash that's going to be spin off each year should be used for debt service to leverage yourself into getting the additional loans that allow you to really get after your stormwater program. So long story short, this fund is in decent shape. Once you get to the point you can start borrowing money again, you'll be able to use your surplus for debt service, and then you'll leverage to really do the magnitude of projects that's required for stormwater. Next slide, please. Unless there's, I'm sorry, any questions on stormwater? Okay, next, please. Safe Neighbor CIP, all this is, the only purpose of this fund is to invest money, invest in projects. Gets its money a little bit from the gas tax you can see up here. Everything else is going to be grants or transfers in primarily from the general fund. What you're going to do, here's another portion of Cairo Lane, under 800,000 down there. You have a grant application that we should get the results of sometime within a couple of weeks at worst case, which will allow us to do a project in the parts, $150,000 grant. We have to match 35%, I'm sorry, 35,000, sorry, again, $37,500. Park fences, which you know about, state grant of 100,000. We have to match it with another 100,000. And then the last one is the police station. So this is what's going on in your CIP fund at this point. Any questions on that, please?
Really quickly, for the sidewalks, will we get a map of how many sidewalks and what areas will be paved in this budget book?
Yes, sir, that'll be part of it. Sidewalks, if I remember right, is roughly about $160,000 per mile for about a 5-foot wide sidewalk. So you're probably talking 1.5 to 2 miles of sidewalk.
Okay.
Let me cut it off at 1.5 miles sidewalks.
And based upon this slide, are we saying that we will not be renovating? City Hall won't be up to date by the end of
It
next
should
year?
have been on there, and thank you for pointing that out. It's an old slide. What you're going to see there is for City Hall. Thank you again. Funding will be increased grants, or in some cases, support of CRA. I apologize for this chart. What you will see in the budget book, you will see $600,000 for the historic grant, which is a start on the project. Will be phase 1 of what's undoubtedly going to be a bigger project, although we think that the general obligation bond fund is going to pay for that as well. And then you'll see $250,000 for the restoration of the firehouse. And again, that'll be, the recommendation is going to be that it be funded as part of the CRA projects. And if not there, we'll have to identify other sources. Sorry, that chart's out of date. Any other questions on the chart? Next, please. Thank you. Your second fund that you do investments in is your People's Transportation Plan, known as PTP. 2 pieces, community bus and CIP. Based on the decisions that were made, you're talking about roughly $700,000 from CITT next year. We haven't gotten the exact number yet. 500,000 because of going to 2 bus routes would be dedicated to the bus portion of it. 200,000 of it would be additional roadway improvement. It does not have a meaningful fund balance to use additional funding at this point. So again, very simple CIP plan. I should point out that a portion of this is not CIP. It's the 2 bus routes. The one we know, which is roughly 210 to 220, and the belief that the second route is somewhere approaching 500,000. Any questions on this chart? Next, please. Town center, very simple message. Revenue it generates is not sufficient to cover its costs. And we also have a property tax issue which needs to be addressed. This was new last year. For various reasons, it's going to be around for FY22. And you can see this is the money that comes in primarily from the general fund, secondarily from some of the other funds who have people occupying the town center, 780 Fishman Street. And you can see we're dealing with a property tax in the range of $155,000 to $160,000. If there's any good news of that, we're paying about $55,000 to $60,000 of that back to ourselves. So those are the 2 primary issues on the town center. Any questions on that, please?
I'll address that as another time. Keep going.
Okay. Get down to last charts for this segment. Again, a reminder, you'll look at this as commissioners. You will not vote on it. As board members, you will vote on it. The CRA for FY22 has got $3 million available to spend. We'll show you on the next slide things that they are going to be recommended to the CRA board. Historic preservation, that may well be the $250,000 that we talked about for the fire station. A somewhat out-of-the-box program for $750,000 called Residential Development Assistance. You'll get more detail on that next time around. Some support of the parks, which we alluded to. Streetscape improvement, again, that would be part of the beautification program, and a doubling of the facades program, again, related to beautification, amongst other things. Next slide, please. Okay, as I said, the CRA is going to have $3 million plus to expend next year. Closing fund balance that we are forecasting at this point is $1.8 million. This revenue number you can take to the bank. It's built into the information we got from the county appraiser. So you take the 1.8, the 1.3 there. You in fact will have close to $3 million to spend. These are the areas that are going to be spent in. Compensation, small amount. Operating expense, small amount. In fact, let's go to the next page and I'll show you the project. Next slide, please. Next projects. This is the detail. Again, within this, you're talking about updating your CRA plan. You're also talking about your legal services and also your administrative support of your facades program. Here are your programs down here. As I said, there is a program. It's called Residential Development Assistance, $750,000. Your facades, $100,000, which is double what we're forecast for this year. Sorry, my eyes aren't what they used to be. Sorry, streetscapes. Again, that would, if in fact that money is all spent on street as part of, all spent on trees as part of beautification, you're talking several hundred additional trees within the CRA area. And then parks amenity, that would include both supporting the park plans and also possibly buying capital such as sunshades and so forth. And I'm happy to report that's the last slide, unless you want to get into each of the divisions, which I think probably nobody does at this point. You're welcome.
Any
So-
questions or comments for Mr. Anderson? All right.
Mr. Mayor, just real quickly, I kind of flew over it, but we go back to Safe Neighborhood CIP. The 3 highlighted items for, I guess it's 2 for parks and 1, of course, that's the grant from the police station. But the 2 line items that relates to trails and fences, were those grants or did we allocate money? I know that it's a significant
Yes, sir. I'm
amount.
sorry to make that clear. The Parks was a grant that we applied for several months ago, and we'll get feedback on that sometime later this month at the latest.
Got it.
It is a match program. It's set up for $150,000. We have to match 20%, which is $37,500. The project, I'm sorry,
And that's the grant that's pending.
that is the grant. That's one of, yes, that's the only grant that we have outstanding that we don't know the results at this point.
Okay, and is that for trails or fences?
That's for trails.
For trails, okay.
You got a $100,000 grant from the state for your fences around several parks. It did require a 1-for-1 match, so it becomes a $200,000 project. The city and or with the help of the CRA will provide the match for the 100,000.
Okay, so the CRA is going to provide that. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions, comments?
No, but thank you, Mr. Anathan, for the presentation tonight. This may have been the first presentation that I've sat through from you that I actually get. So thank you. And I'm sure Ms. Lazier had a hand in this also. And then just thank everyone that, is sitting here in the audience that's, taking time out of your schedule, but really for this breakdown and for it to be very succinct and understandable. So I do appreciate that, and I look forward to moving the city forward. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Anthony, again, hats off to you. You're a brave man to stand in between doing the budget.
It's my pleasure.
And going through this information when all of us are working professionals here, so we all had long days. And to be able to go through this and make sure that we're clear, we understand, and bring up those points. We really appreciate the work that you're putting into this city. Mr. Manager, I would love to make sure, and also Mr. Anthony, if there were investments in sidewalks, there were investments in parks and trails, it would be great if we can get details of those in like picture form so that our residents can see what is upcoming, what are their tax dollars going to be paying for. So we can just get a map of the new sidewalks that we're going to plan in the next year, or the new fences or the new trails. That would be really helpful for the morale of our city. And also, it would be great if we can get a detail of the marketing plan for a lot of these things, because we would love to be able to market the sidewalks. We would love to be able to market new construction, the city hall, the parks, and also this see, click, fix thing. Like, those are things that we really would like to see, and our residents need to see. So we can get an understanding of how we're going to market those things. That'll be very helpful for us as a commission and also for many of our residents. Any closing remarks, Mr. Manager?
Mr. Mayor, thank you for your comments. Mr. Anthony, I guess you're going to have pictures in the book this year. Me and Mr. Anthony had a debate, pictures or no pictures. I said the mayor beat us up last year because we didn't have pictures in the budget book and proper logo and design. And I know me and Mr. Anthony were talking back and forth, so I guess we will try to incorporate pictures and graphs and different things.
Whatever works. This is about the people. If this is a document, literally the document of the city telling the residents what their money is going to, and it'll be helpful for them to be able to see it, because numbers are one thing, but be able to see. And even if it's not part of the budget documents, but people just need to see the changes that are going to be made and investment that we're going to be having. So with that, any other final comments, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, just want to remind you all that the next budget workshop is July 21st at 5:30 p.m. And I will be sending out a calendar invite in the morning.
All right, sounds good. I'm glad it's at 5:30 and give us a little bit of time to get off work and get here. All right. Anything else? All right, thank you everyone for that. We will have a motion to adjourn. Moved by
Second.
Commissioner Teller, second by Commissioner Davis. Everyone have a good evening. Take care.